You know, after going up after Paul, and then George, and then I thought maybe there was going to be a John, but there wasn't. I'm kind of the only girl so far, but that was fabulous. This is an amazing day, and thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate being part of such a dynamic group of speakers, and also hopefully be able to interact with you guys as well. I went to Hawaii a few years ago with one shoe. I ended up there with one shoe. I've flown around the world, and I usually end up at some point not having my passport right before I'm trying to get on the plane. Has this happened to any of you? I barely made it to London yesterday, and not my fault this time. But my mom, on the way to try and get a backup passport at one point before going to a lecture, said, "You don't have any yo-yo time. What is wrong with you?" And yo-yo is an interesting term that I want to teach you, which is the space in between things. There's actually not an English word for this term, and it's everything that we don't think about. It's getting there before you're supposed to get there. It's having prep time, having the space in between. And I was teaching on this trip in Hawaii when I had one shoe, and a student came up to me, and he didn't speak very good English. He was finishing up a year traveling around the world, and I asked him, "Could you describe what yo-yo means to you?" He's Japanese. And I'm fourth generation Japanese, so the only thing I can say is "Nihongo wakarimasen," which means I don't speak Japanese. So he said he drew this out for me on a napkin, and I saved it, and he says it's the extra, it's the abundance. And as product people and as people who design things and on the fast turn schedules that we have, we really don't take the time to think about all the things that are in between. And that's really what I want to impart with you today, and I'll kind of travel on that theme as we go through the day. But it is important as we iterate and move fast and do everything that we need to do that we take the time to think about the in-between. So how many of you have dropped your phone into water and destroyed it? How did you feel at that moment? Yeah, the shit moment, yeah. And it's been interesting because the iPhone came out. Did any of you guys read about the fact that iOS 7 now turns off your phone if you drop it in the water, so it's waterproof? A lot of people believed it. And they tried it, and it's not true. So I think that's really interesting because there was a poll that came out, what happens when you do something to your phone and how do you feel? And God, people were feeling panicked, and most people don't go more than 10 minutes without checking their phone. And I think I'll challenge you not to check your phone. I think a lot of you have been pretty good. I see a lot of tablets out. But, but it's pretty interesting because we are addicted to this checking habit. I'm attempting to write this book, and I was procrastinating and checking my phone and realizing I couldn't stop checking it even though I knew that no one had sent me anything because it was nighttime. And I started looking this up. What does it mean to habitually grab your phone and check it? It turns out that there's a term called the checking habit, and that we do check our phones about every 10 minutes, and it's an unconscious thing. We just reach for it, grab it, check it to see if there's any updates, put it back down again. And what's interesting is it's actually part of what's happening to rewire our brains. Did you know that your brains are being rewired? We now have super short attention spans because we're so used to multitasking. And it is true, even though women can multitask slightly better than men, there's still the benefit of finishing one thing at a time, concentrating, and doing it all the way through, that we are now being rewired so that we don't have that ability anymore. Have any of you guys had kids and watched some old movies that you used to love when you were little? I pulled out Mary Poppins the other day, and I think I fell asleep in the first 10 minutes. The credits just went on forever. Now the credits are at the end because we don't have the patience for that anymore. It's very interesting. So we're actually rewiring our brains to have short attention spans, and our kids have short attention spans. And we're creating a generation of people who cannot go for more than 10 minutes without checking their phones. I find this disturbing. I've been talking about this for several years. I'm actually not really on social media. I think that we have a responsibility as designers of products and services and behaviors of the future to really think about this. Have you guys seen the Facebook ads? So when Facebook came out with this new, kind of direction, I think one of the most telling quotes was from one of my favorite blogs, where he said, Facebook is celebrating all the wrong things, and it makes Facebook Home look like the best possible way to be the least present. So what are we doing and what are we creating? So I think about this a lot, and I was doing some research recently into the educational space, thinking about books, and a very big publisher of academic books came to us and said, can you do some research on what the future of learning is? And we said, yeah, this sounds great. And they were really hoping for a lot of innovation and technology and, everything that you can imagine. As a matter of fact, Korea has made a statement, a very clear statement, that they are going to get rid of all textbooks by 2015. Everything's going to be digital. Now, when we did this research, we went to college universities all over, asked kids, we didn't go to high schools yet, what do you want out of education? What motivates you to learn? Who is your favorite teacher? And they all said it was personal connection. It wasn't about technology. It was about face-to-face communication. Things that could enhance that were really great. They loved books. They don't even mind carrying them around in their backpacks. They love going through and writing notes in person. They like going through at their own pace. They love taking highlighters and highlighting pages and decorating it up and making it their own. They remember visually. They remember through experience. It's really disturbing because in Korea they are also treating digital addiction starting at age 3. These kids are falling asleep with their tablets, holding them like teddy bears. They are becoming anxious when the battery life goes below 10%. I love forward thinking, I love that. I love thinking about the future, but I'm not particularly happy about this type of future, at least for my children, right? So I think that part of what's starting to happen is that we're devolving, right, a little bit, and yes, it's exciting to have all these new technologies and so much that we can do and be and say, but I want to look up and look at people. I want to travel, talk. I don't want everyone at one table to be looking at their phones the entire time. I've banned all phones from our house, technology from the bedroom, and I really want to grow up being able to see and talk to people. So a lot has been talked about in the past years about sort of this pleasure/fun/addiction and getting people hooked on things. What is that? What's that word that people said? We want it to be sticky. Remember when marketing needed to be really sticky? And we were driving people into these experiences where they were kind of forced to come back through really short-term pleasure. And I've really been moving a lot towards ritual, which is understanding how people live their lives every day, what they do, what's their regular pattern of behavior, and how can we sort of fit into this behavior. And that to me is understanding a little bit more towards ritual. And then lately we've been thinking a lot about meaning. And I do think that companies that provide meaningful experiences will be the companies that survive in the future because there's so much going on right now. And not only do you have to provide utility, but you have to provide meaning for people's lives. When I first started talking, I gave this talk, Zynga was on top of the world. And as we watched their stock go down, and finally Zynga has rather exited the scene, I think people are starting to see that it is transitioning past this pleasure addiction and really moving into meaning. So how do we get from mindless to meaningful? I think about lifestyle integration being the most important. So if you are creating something, again, to harken back to all the speakers from today, it's not really about one product or one thing, it's about the entire experience. It's about the system. It's about connected experiences. And so we really believe that there is a meaningful nugget that gets hidden in this area I call inner conscious. Paul actually wrote a book called Grouped, And he talks about non-conscious, and it's really difficult to explain because there really isn't a term for this, because it lays somewhere between the aware conscious state and the unaware subconscious state. And so I've decided to call it inner conscious, and this is where we are doing all of our research right now, helping companies understand their customers at a different level and helping customers somehow relay what it is about that experience that they're having that drives past the awareness level into the subconscious and stays there and makes all their decisions and really creates that kind of affinity. So with this type of research, we use all kinds of mixed methods, and I'm all for data. You know, I'm not just qualitative and quantitative separate. I just want as much data as I can get. But we want to get past what people tell us, right, and what people are actually doing. We were just talking about this. And it's really interesting. So, you know, if you think about it like this, there's a logical layer that goes kind of across one spectrum. And that's also things that primarily people are aware of. Price, for instance, if you're buying a car. How much cubic space there is, what color it is. As you get into this unaware implicit behavior, it's a little bit more emotional. And it's what the brand is and your memories of driving up with your parents having a Volvo, or my dad loving a '67 Mustang, and I love these classic cars. And so you have a nostalgic memory, an attachment to the brand, something else that drives you that it's a little bit unspoken. And so you kind of need to merge these together. And as we do research, you know, there's a shift happening in the industry right now, which is great for researchers, where all the dollars that have been previously spent on marketing and advertising, focus groups, surveys, all of the studies that are happening, they're finally understanding that there's a lot of value in this user experience research, service design, design research space. And so they're kind of starting to migrate over towards this type of research, which is fantastic because it's really where understanding the meaning comes. And if you think about a focus group, and I almost have a sign on the door that says we don't do focus groups, but sometimes we can get really good feedback with small groups, 2 or 3 people that already know each other, not 8 or 10 people at a time. And for us, it's the difference between, if I ask you, how many of you guys wash your hands when you go to the bathroom? Anybody? That's focus group, right? Now, if we actually took a camera in there and, okay, there's a line and speakers are starting, you know, maybe it wouldn't be as high. So the difference between what people say they're going to do and what they actually do is pretty profound. There was an NPR study that I listened to, and they were asking questions like, how many go to church every week? And I think, you know, 46% of the people polled said they went to church. But the reality was that it wasn't that they were lying. That was the desired state that they wanted to be. But when they actually interviewed people and said, not how many of you go to church, but they said, what do you do on Monday? Oh, great, so during the week you're doing this. Okay, what's your regular schedule? Okay, now let's get to the weekend and Saturday, what usually happens? Okay, now on Sunday, what happens? And they would tell them. And this is what happens on the real day-to-day basis, and even more so if you take and ask them questions on that actual day and they're marking it down in a diary or something. You can actually find out what people are doing. So people aren't lying in surveys necessarily. They're just saying what their aspirational self would probably do most of the time. So it's really important for us to understand how this type of research really gets into lifestyle. And the emotional values are huge, and it really is going to drive us. So in the past, since the 1960s, there's been something called sensory engineering that's been out in the product space. And this is primarily out of Japan, right? Japan was really, really, really big through product design in the 70s and 80s. And so what started to happen is there's QFD, which is looking at the quality and how it affects people. Kano methodology, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but I know there were some blog posts from Mind the Product on it about getting past expectations and moving into the wow factor. Like if you have a cup and the cup doesn't leak, that's not really a wow factor because you expect the cup not to leak. But if it does other things, like you can throw it in your bag and it doesn't leak, that's a wow factor. You know, there's Conseil that got introduced finally into the US. Conseil is something that we've really gravitated towards. And it's really understanding the emotional value that products have and how we connect with it. Then we have the crash, and then we have the iPhone, and now we really have convergence that's happening. So sensory engineering basically is telling us that this important attribute of research and imparting this into product design, and Toyota is a big, big proponent of concept methodology, is now moving into the products and services that we're creating. So there's definitely emerging. I call it emotional usability or sensory engineering. And it really is about taking these old methods and applying it to what we're doing today. So I find this pretty interesting. It's a little bit complex. So what I've tried to do is take the essence of what concept methodology is trying to tell us and kind of boil it down between this hybrid of what's happening from an emotional level and a logical level. And what we've done is we have started a new methodology called why finding, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But what it does is it really takes us into the utterances that people say, which are called concept words. And we take these words that are from these targeted interviews and observations and then begin to understand the emotional connections that people have with your brand, with your service, and with your product. So I want to show you a little bit of the type of research that we do. These are all from actual research projects. We really like to get in context. It's so important because people aren't just using products and services in one place. We try and go to at least 2 locations with them. We try and spend at least 90 minutes with them. We go into stores. We ride in cars with them. We try and film it whenever possible because we're really telling stories about these people, and we're trying to take the importance of their lives back to our stakeholders to say, hey, you guys, you really need to pay attention because this is what people are saying, and we're watching them, and this is what they really need. So this type of research is really important towards what I call why finding. And what why finding is, in a nutshell, is finding these key emotional connectors that are attributes of this emotional branding that connect these people to your product. And it's really important for you to understand what they are. And you may have several. Every company has different emotional connectors ranging from ease of use all the way up through identity or ego, and then getting into aspiration or dreaming. And it can really cross the gambit. So if you think about it on a spectrum, you have things that people are aware of and things that they're unaware of, things that are emotional, things that are more logical. And when someone says, oh, I love it, I love it, I love this pen, I love the way it clicks, I love this shirt I have, it's my favorite shirt, I love this product, I use it every day. What do they mean by it? The fact that they say, I love it, is the trigger for us to dive deeper. It's a technique called laddering. It's a little bit like an annoying 4-year-old that keeps asking why. And you get deeper and deeper and deeper into understanding. It just works. I plug it in, it totally works. Gosh, it just meets my needs. It just does everything I really want it to do, and I don't even have to tell it. And these are all the words that people throw out that we then take and cobble together and try and figure out what are these emotional connectors that are really going to help people meet their needs. And so when we divide it up, it really does start with ease of use. And depending on what quadrant you're in right now, you could be a startup and you're focusing on the aware and rational part, and you're just making it work and building trust, and that's okay because those are really important emotional connectors. Maybe you aren't all the way up the emotional spectrum towards, I'm dreaming about it. It totally knows what I need. It meets all my needs. You do not have to cross all of that. Just take one quadrant at a time and really challenge yourself to make that happen. One of the things that we realize is that input is tricky, and you have all kinds of input into this why finding. So it's psychological, it's sensorial, touch and feel. The home button on the iPhone keeps getting more and more advanced, but one of the things that it did for people is it created comfort, because whenever they clicked on it, they were always going home. A lot of the other devices didn't do that, didn't understand the value of that. It was also discoverable, because if you double-clicked on it, something else would happen. if you pressed it down and held it, I think you could program it. There's different aspects to it, including the fact that it was just a tactile click that was comfortable. You could roll your hand on it and felt something. And so it was kind of interesting. So now you just touch it, reads your fingerprint, kind of getting to that advanced level. But really, it's about the experience and the output. This is AOL. And I don't know if you could hear that. I could try it again, see if the volume's up.
You've got mail.
So that was a trigger for a lot of people that created comfort, especially when you were new to the internet, you had this friendly voice coming in, right? So sometimes it can be an audio clip or something that is nostalgic. And really, do any of you have the Nest? Do you guys have the Nest over here? So the Nest, yeah? No, one person was saying no. Okay, people that have the Nest love the Nest. And it's a thermostat, and as part of the rules of don't try and be too clever, this is really important because this replaces your home thermostat with something that feels fabulous when you turn it. It looks amazing. It's super intuitive. It starts to learn your behavior. You can turn it up automatically. It'll start to learn that you wake up at certain times and start to warm the house a little bit early. If you live in an area where it needs to be cooled or heated while you're gone, it'll start to program this as you get home. So these are the emotional connectors for this product, and people really gravitate towards these aspects of a very utilitarian device.
My goal right now is to get published in the New Yorker. There's no higher honor than getting published in the New Yorker.
I saw an article where the makeup was just fabulous, and how do I get to that point? I don't want to work at a store for the rest of my life, but it's the easiest thing right now.
Sometimes clients are just like, shoot me an image, and they can see it right there, right now. And I can do video, same thing.
I'm on Facebook. I'm on there all day. I'm not actively engaged in it all day, but it's kind of on all day. I want to take the 14L up at 24th and Mission. There's one in 1 minute, one in 6 minutes, and one in 20 minutes.
I still live paycheck to paycheck, so when I buy something large, it takes up a huge chunk of that everyday paycheck. The brands that I choose, I pick because of their ability to be used in a variety of ways. I think it reflects my personality in the sense that you can't just wake up one day and do something. You have to put effort into it, and everything is a step. So I've always done really well with brands that have steps in their process.
This is good design. It's nice. It's good. But this is way better. Why? I don't know. I think it's just simpler.
It feels vast. This huge dark space. It feels infinite.
It's the tiny stuff that changes everything.
I just get flushed with emotion, and it just kind of overwhelms me.
So we do this type of contextual research a lot for organizations that are trying to get past that initial layer of what they understand about their audience. As a matter of fact, we had a large hotel company come to us, and they had their audience segmented really nicely into luxury travelers and business travelers and family and then budget. That makes sense, right? And that's how all the marketing was targeting and how their little landing pages and advertising snippets went out. And when we did our interviews and combined it with surveys and remote interviews and then in person, we helped them resegment towards people that were really into experience and wanted to understand everything about what the experiences was going to be when they were there, not just at the hotel, but around, and what was playing and what the music was like, and what the bed was like, and the pillows, and the ability to switch out pillows and things like that. And then there were people that were just brand affinity oriented, that were trusting certain brands, and were going to go to that brand no matter what. And then there were all the budget and budget conscious people. And this resegmented across all their previous channels that they already had. And it really made them think differently about this attitude and behavior that previously was targeted through traditional demographics, age, occupation. When we do segmentation like this in recruiting, we understand that you have to start with something, but we like to say, why do you need that age range? What is it that you're trying to get? What is it you're trying to screen out? Because it's not about demographics anymore. It's really about psychographic attitude and behavior, and that's making all the difference. So in the end, we find out what are the things that Lisa loves about her Bose headset. What are the things that she loves to touch with her volume control and everything, you know, that's out there, and what is it that she really engages with? What doesn't work for Brandon? He really doesn't like his phone. His phone's not working for him. So what is it that's disappointing him, and what are his needs? And so we gather all this information up and put it into a contextual timeline so we can really see what is happening during the day and what are people really engaging with. And then in the end, we look at all these aspects and create a contextual persona so that we can understand a little bit more about that person. And does this take months? We don't have months. Are you kidding? We're doing this in short time frames, and we're also iterating along with a lot of production cycles because we still have to meet pretty tight timelines and deadlines. And so in the end, when you understand what are the factors that are keeping someone from completing a task, it's really interesting. And I know this one large, it was like a Dell or HP, when they first launched their mobile site, they realized that when people were going onto their site at night, they were primarily trying to complete a purchase or a transaction that they did not have time to during the day, and they needed to make that super, super easy for them. When we work with a healthcare and something about insurance, we realized that most of the people coming on there at night on their mobile devices, they were doing so because they couldn't call customer service during the day because they were working. So there's different things that are happening when people are using different devices at different times, and no one is ever on one device at one place completing a task from beginning to end. It's always broken up during the day, and it's broken up across devices, and for different reasons. And it does get tricky to map out. But we are also using DScout and trying this out, and DScout, amongst other tools, really does allow you to sort of have digital diaries of your end users so you don't have to be with them all the time. And so here's some of the types of missions that you can send out and get back, where you can ask someone to do something and it makes it really easy for them to shoot video, take a picture of their environment, look at what's happening here and now, and then send that back so you have some idea of context, right? So it's not easy to do this type of contextual research, but I really encourage, how many of you guys are already doing contextual research in your organization? So, I mean, next year, all hands up, because really, if you're not, then you aren't going to be able to take it to the next level. And I'm not saying you have to go out there every single week, but if your team can go out once a quarter, for starters, and just sit with and meet with your target audience if you have the ability. One time I was working with JIGPAC, the Joint Intelligence Commission or something, and we absolutely did not have access to the people that were planning bomb sites and things like that for security missions. So in that case, you have to try and get the next best thing. When we do work with government entities, we try and get people that actually are subject matters at least of the area, and so we can interview them. So the shift that's happening from marketing and advertising over to the product mindset is pretty profound. As we build more products and services, Nike, I would have a shoe there earlier, but now I have the Nike band. And I think that what's important to realize is that marketing used to be all about sort of static marketing site, not very much functionality, right? Stakeholder drama. I don't know if, I mean, it still exists. Absolute business requirements, right? Hard deadline, no flexibility, and then usually you're tied to a legacy system. And as we move towards this product focus, you really have to be more dynamic and progressive. Have smaller adaptable teams. You're focused on web or mobile apps or cross-device experiences. Your teams are hopefully running rather autonomously. You have flexible requirements. You hopefully have flexible delivery because maybe you're delivering every day or every week, or your sprint cycles are pretty short. And then you're always going to need to get feedback from your customer. As we were building an app called Tempo, it's a calendar app, sorry, it's a calendar app, we started doing these 10-minute tests in the hallway and just started getting feedback on what I call UI snippets. And we would do this every week. So it wasn't specific, it wasn't expensive. What we wanted to do is test real people in their environment for short periods of time on a regular basis. We hired interns to help us with this process so the cost went down. And the feedback was amazing as we rolled out all of our sprint cycles. And so as we get into sort of this next phase of product focus, I have a network of 23 countries, and we came together last year to run a gesture study. And we did this gesture study in 18 countries with 360 people to see if that we could sort of discover what the similarities and differences were across cultures for spontaneous air gestures, like volume up, volume down, switching between pages in a guide, turning the TV off. There were some really interesting findings, and if you're interested in that study, I can give you more information. But one of the things that it's turned into are things like the Mio. Any of you familiar with the Mio? So it's actually a band that has multiple sensors in it, and it's accelerometer, and it will do your muscles, so it actually can tell how you're articulating your hand. Leap Motion came out, and it's been fun to experiment with, but as we get into the future, you're going to need to be more contextual, more behavioral, a little more flexible with the way that you're incorporating these new devices that are coming out now. And the only thing to realize is that there is a difference between what we think will happen and the ability for our customer to actually cope with what's happening, because people aren't moving as fast as technology. So you still have a little bit of time, don't worry. But this crux here, this crisis point where the complexity meets their ability and they're able to move forward, that's at the point where you really have to act. And it's not too far away. So I think about this term, which is continuous improvement, and this is also a term that was used quite often in the auto industry, is thinking about how to continuously iterate. I think about the marginal improvements that Tim was mentioning, and Dan Saffer wrote a great book called Micro Interactions, and it's really a perfect kind of antidote to some of the things that I'm talking about today, because you can think about it on a large level, but it's also these small continuous improvements that you're able to make over time that create that love that people have for products, that create that attachment that they have. And so you don't have to go all at once. You can think of it iteratively. So long-term goals need to focus on meaning, not just pleasure. Mixed methods need to be employed, and really it's a mindset that needs to cross starting here into your whole organization and culture, that contextual research and continuous iterative improvement and all the things that we're talking about today are really important. But remember, people don't change as quickly as technology. One of my designers, super techie guy from China, they got a phone, a rotary dial phone at their house, did not have caller ID. So when the phone rang, they all looked at it. And then he told me, he said, it was so cool because every call was a surprise. And so, thinking about that, people don't always use the technology that you have in the way that you think it might. So, as a final thought, this is not a new thought. Ethos, pathos, logos, you might recognize that from 2,000 years ago, where you are trying to create trust, which is the ethos, and then go between the pathos and the logos, which is the emotion and the logic. And if you do these things, then you have a masterpiece. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much.